of exercises that HSEEP is used for. So there are two main types of exercises that HSEEP tries to cover, which are discussion-based and operation-based. So those discussion-based exercises are built on discussions and conversations. They are used to gain familiarity with plans, policies, procedures, and even agreements that an organization may have. They tend to be stepping stones for more complex exercises like operational ones. They usually consist of things that are seminars, like this one, workshops, tabletop exercises, or even games. I've seen a lot of cool games that people create using HSEEP to help with disasters. I think there is a teenager a couple years ago who made a whole game based off of disaster simulating using this concept, and it was really, really cool. But on the flip side of those discussion-based exercises, we have operations-based exercises. So this is the doing of, a plan or policy or procedure or agreement. This is us trying to validate those processes that we have, clarifying different roles and responsibilities of different individuals, identifying what sort of resources or gaps or improvements need to be made. We do these through drills, simulations, functional exercises, and full-scale exercises. So this is very action-oriented and is meant to mirror real life. So what is HSEEP? HSEEP is a doctrine that consists of an integrated set of principles that frames a common approach to exercises. HSEEP has been around since 2002, when it was created by the Department of Homeland Security after the department was created itself. The goal was to provide exercise designers with this list of principles so that we could consistently create exercises across the United States. So the principles that HSEEP uses is it wants to be guided by elected or appointed officials on an organizational level and not government. Those are going to be your senior leadership. These are the decision makers and the stakeholders that are invested in the exercise process. The exercise process means nothing if you don't have the community and decision makers involved. Having leaders guide this program is a great way to ensure the success of your exercise program. It's also capability-based and objective-driven. So HSEEP exercises are mainly used to evaluate current capability levels and targets skills, and they want to be using this to identify any gaps that we may have in those capability levels, skill levels, or those targets. Being objective-driven helps us assess our performance, so it's a much more effective process. It also looks to be a whole community integrated, which we're looking to get everybody involved in the exercise at every stage of the cycle. And we'll talk more a little bit about community integration shortly. It also is informed by risk. So a big thing is that HSEEP is used for people that are looking to simulate or practice and train for disasters. So HSEEP looks to analyze what sort of hazards or risks your organization may face and create and design exercises based off of those risks you may face. It also creates a common methodology. Using a common methodology amongst all designers and missionaries, it doesn't matter where you go. If somebody uses HSEEP, you're going to be able to understand their whole entire design process. They also use a progressive planning approach. So this planning approach is used to create multiple exercises that have the same objective in order to increase competency of the skill over years. It's not a linear approach, but it is very cyclical, consisting of exercising, evaluation, improvement planning, and doing that all over and over and over again until the skill is mastered. So why do we use HSEEP? Well, we kind of talked about that a little bit when we were talking about the principles that guide HSEEP. HSEEP is used because it creates a consistent approach to design. It doesn't matter what you're designing, you can use HSEEP for it. It's been adopted all over the nation because of the consistency that it brings to the table. This program has been used by law enforcement, EMS, fire rescue, disaster managers like myself, even city planners, wastewater, waste, like hospitals and even universities use this exercise program as well. So all these different organizations have a different goal. They're trying to test something different, but they're all able to create similar exercises that look the same, that work the same, because they have a set of consistent principles to follow. Another reason why people use HSEEP is because it is focused on organizational objectives and capabilities. So HSEEP is really useful because it focuses on objectives. It's really looking at what you want to accomplish and then designing an exercise based off of that. One of the ways that this is done is by using the 31 core capabilities that is set aside by the National Preparedness System. We'll discuss these core capabilities later on and more in depth further into the presentation, but having these capabilities and these objectives guide the intent of the exercise. Because of its work to guide the design of an exercise, many organizations have adopted this program to manage and guide their overall organizational exercise programs. So like most things in the professional world, HSEEP is very cyclical. It follows this cycle of program management, design and development, conduct, evaluation, and improvement planning. These four, sorry, it skipped ahead a little bit on me there. But the first step in this is the design and development stage. This is the longest stage in my opinion. As an exercise designer or a simulator, you're going to be spending most of your time here. This is where all your planning takes place. This is where all these meetings happen. This is all the discussions. And this is where you give legs to your idea. Once that's all completed, you jump into the conducting of your exercise. This is kind of that you build up to Christmas and then Christmas Day is here and it's over in a flash. But this is the most important stage because it leads to evaluation. And during the conduction of your simulation or your exercise, that's where you're going to get all the data to evaluate how well your organization did or did not do during your exercise. And from evaluation, we move into improvement planning, where we can look at what we maybe didn't do as well and think about how we can do better next time. Or even if we did great, what can we continue to do in order to maintain our skills and abilities? So encompassing these four stages of HSEEP, we have program management, which is something that you're going to continuously do throughout the using of this process. Program management is where the leadership and decision-making officials are going to collaborate to achieve the goals of your exercise or your exercise program. So diving into a little bit more into program management, we know that program management is the process of overseeing or integrating a variety of exercises over time. This isn't what encircles the entire program. We do this before we even conduct our exercises, even after we conduct our exercises, while we're conducting our exercises. This establishes an organization's exercise program and allows us to oversee the integrity of a variety of exercise over multiple years. Good program management also allows you to take a planning approach that involves senior leadership and community stakeholders, calling back to some of those original HC principles. Designing exercises is a team effort, and an effective exercise program needs to involve everyone who has a stake in what you're trying to do. An effective exercise program will be efficient in the use of its resources, its time, its funding, in order to build and deliver strong skills and capabilities. So the program management works off of what we call the integrated preparedness cycle, which is what allows us to have an effective program management for exercises. This is a cycle based off of planning, organization, equipment, training, exercising, evaluating, and improving on to regularly examine the ever-changing threats or hazards and risks that we might face as organizations or entities. The goal of this cycle is to assess threats, update plans, and make implementations to fill any gaps or shortcomings that this cycle identifies as it's identifying threats and hazards. This helps to develop preparedness priorities for the organization to create a reliable approach to decision-making, resource allocation, and measure any progress in the skills that we're building and sustaining those capabilities that we have as organizations. Ultimately, this approach is a means to achieve a whole community preparedness in a measurable way. And it marries really well into the HSEEP cycle. So the cycle of preparedness is connected to the exercise cycle. If you look at this little chart we've got here, I don't know if you can see my tiny little cursor on the screen, but as we're going around that preparedness cycle, once we hit the exercise, we can pull right into the exercise cycle that HSEEP has developed and look at design and implementation, development. And follow that through conducting our exercise, evaluating our exercise, and improvement planning, where it brings us right back to that preparedness cycle, where we're trying to evaluate and improve preparedness within our communities. So these two cycles, turn together in a single exercise. This turns as a single exercise, but this kind of turns as an entire program and a lifestyle of preparedness. So that first step of the cycle that we're looking at for using and effectively using HSEEP is design and development. So this is kind of the bones of it. This is the first stage, the longest stage, where we're designing our exercise. In the design and development stage, the planning for the exercise is what's going to take place. You're going to be having a lot of meetings during this time, filling out any sort of planning documents that you may need for your exercise. Your planning team will be applying guidance from your leadership organizations to shape the concepts and the considerations for your exercise while developing any necessary planning materials. But where do you even start to identify the concepts or scenarios that you want to build your exercise around? Well, we have a little flow chart for that, which you can see right here at the bottom of the screen. The first thing we want to do is identify factors for consideration. So these are going to be the things that impact our exercise. Is there a specific hazard or a threat that we want to address with this exercise or this simulation? Maybe there's a certain skill that your organization wants to improve, or maybe your organization is even looking to receive a specific accreditation. So we want to look at what our organization is planning to do, whether it's threat assessment, looking to attack a hazard, so that whether it's something like a hazmat incident, fire suppression, even if it's just testing different medical skills, like giving a patient a shot, those are the sorts of things that we want to consider. Those are factors that we want to consider as we are designing our exercise. Once we have those factors figured out, we can link those factors to a core capability, like I was talking about earlier. The National Preparedness Goals outlines 5 different preparedness missions known as core capabilities. These are things that are such as prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. These are kind of the areas in which we like to test things. These core capabilities are used to examine current and required capability levels and identify whatever sort of gaps we may have in our skill set. Linking these factors to a core capability helps identify the area most in need of attention. And once we have that area that needs the attention, know what area needs the attention, we can start to establish program priorities. But before we do that, I did want to give you guys some information on mission areas and core capabilities, as HSEEP talks about this stuff a lot, and it's a very FEMA-minded thing. So our core capabilities and our mission areas are designed to measure, describe, and implement security and resiliency techniques. There are 32 different core capabilities, so I'm not going to go through each and every single one of them, but they exist and they're part of the National Preparedness Goal, which are classified into the 5 different mission areas you can see to the side: that prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. Something that we see overall within these core capabilities that are in all of these categories is things like planning. You do planning at every stage of a disaster. You do, public information and warning. How are we communicating with people, whether it's our employees at a hospital or even citizens within the community? Are we, and operational coordination is another huge one. Are we working and communicating well with people that maybe aren't working within our own silo? So these are kind of the common areas that span all 5 mission areas. If you want to explore these capabilities more and how they each fit into the different mission areas of prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery, you can find them on the FEMA's website under the National Preparedness Goal site. So once all that's established, we can establish our exercise program priorities. So we kind of know what tasks we want to get done. We know what things need fixing. So now we have those priorities. We want to figure out what we really want to accomplish. And this is where goal setting and creating objectives really comes into place. Our objectives are such an important part of exercise design because this is kind of what's going to guide everything. And without having good, measurable, smart objectives, the data that we collect during an exercise or a simulation or a drill is not going to mean anything. So we want those objectives to be smart. So objectives can be different depending on what sort of exercise you're using, whether it's an operational exercise or a discussion-based exercise. Discussion-based exercises, again, are a little bit less complex than operational exercises, so your objectives might not be as complex. When it comes to operational exercises, those really complex mirroring real life exercises, you're going to want to get a little bit more in depth. One of the terms that FEMA uses with operational based exercises, they call it a critical task. So you build your SMART objective, that specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound objective of what you want to accomplish, and then you assign a task to it. So say I'm working a decontamination event and I want to measure how quickly my people can put on their PPE in order to activate for that event. One of my critical tasks would be that they put their gloves on, last, or they're wearing their proper booties, or that they identified what chemical was spilled. Those sorts of things, those are the sorts of tasks that you need to complete in order to reach your objective. Thankfully, FEMA is kind and benevolent most of the time, and they provide a lot of documents to help you with your design. Looking at it for the first time, it can be really, really overwhelming, but they create these kind of plug and chugs. If you look on the very far right of the screen at the exercise overview is kind of an example of what some of this documentation looks like. It's a kind of a plug and chug document that's tens of pages long that kind of asks you the questions of what you're looking for. Does your exercise have a name? Does your exercise have dates? What's the scope of practice for your exercise? What sort of mission areas are you looking to accomplish? What are those core capabilities? Objectives for the exercise? What threat or hazard that you're looking to assess during the exercise? Just a really quick, brief scenario, who's participating in your exercise and who to contact. These are kind of what build what we call situation manuals, which is what we use for discussion-based exercises, and exercise plans, which we use for our operational-based exercises. There's also guides and documents like a facilitator guide, so the person who is guiding the exercise, they have guides for them. And there's also different meeting templates, so they even create PowerPoints for you to guide those concept and objective meetings that you might have within the first weeks of deciding that you want to do an exercise. Excuse me. So the next step, after all the planning is done, all the preparations for Christmas is over, is to finally conduct the exercise. So we were doing things like preparedness activities, such as like setting up the lab that we're doing our simulation in, the room that we're having our tabletop exercise in. We're testing our AV equipment. We're applying moulage maybe to some of our actors. This is the exercise play that happens afterwards. And everybody, during exercise play, everybody has a role or a job, whether they are the actual players, like if your nurses are practicing evacuations, they would be your players. The evaluators are the people who are not necessarily participating in the exercise, but watching to see how maybe your nurses are performing and taking notes to report back after the exercise. Then you have people like observers who are just looking at the exercise to kind of get a vibe for what you do. And then you have the facilitators or the controllers, and these are the ones that are making sure that the exercise stays on task. So there are things to help guide the conduction of your exercise. It is a pretty brief, things like liability forms, safety forms, even sign-in sheets. You want to be able to document who was at your exercise, and you want to make sure that all your participants and players are being safe. You also can conduct actor and player briefings, and these are to inform your actors or your players what exactly is going on, what's expected of them, and set up any rules or guidelines for them to follow at the very beginning before you even get into exercise conduct. So once an exercise has been conducted, Then you move on to evaluation, which is arguably one of the most important parts of using the HC process. So evaluation allows for an organization to assess the performance of the objectives and the tasks that we set during that design and development stage, and document any sort of strengths or areas of improvement that we found along the way. This very much connects the exercise to improvement planning, because at the end of the day, the reason that we exercise is because we want to get better, right? Whether it's doing actual exercise for our health or doing trainings and drills for continuing education purpose. We want to get better. So in order to get better, we have to know where we started from. So we're going to use tools like exercise evaluation guides, also known as EEGs. We want to hear back from our participants, so we'll use participant feedback forms to maybe hear about how we as designers and planners can do better next time, or some of the things that they saw and they thought that they could do better on. We can also use an exercise plan in that situation manual that we identified in the conduct in the design slides as well, or even controller and evaluator handbooks where they can see the goals and objectives that we're using or trying to test, and they can write their comments on it. The goal for evaluation is to collect data, whether that's through observations, surveys, hot washes, debriefs. This is the important data part so that we can continue to grow and develop our exercise program. EEGs, in my opinion, are a really, really big part of this. So exercise evaluation guides can look really complicated. You can see kind of an example of an exercise evaluation guide template. These are something that when we are hosting exercises, whether it be at the city or at the university, that we pass out to anybody who has agreed to evaluate our exercise. So if you can look really, really closely, I know it's a little bit blurry because it's a large image that I had to shrink down. It identifies the organizational capability target so that maybe one or two of those things that we're really wanting to test, and the critical tasks that need to be completed in order to achieve that overarching goal. And then on that second page in the middle, there is this little chart where we can write down as evaluators what capability target we're looking at and what critical tasks were associated with it and what we saw them doing while they were doing that task. And then we can kind of give them a rating. If they performed super well, we give them a P, that's performed without challenges. If they performed with some challenges, like they still kind of got the gist of it, but weren't quite there, we kind of identify that as an S. If they performed with major challenges, we give that an M, so this is like they didn't get the task at all. And if they were unable to perform it, totally flunked the test, then they get a U. But this is a very streamlined way of collecting data. When you give these sorts of forms to your evaluators, the evaluators are going to fill it out the same way across the board. You have the same rating systems, you're getting your observations, and it's all in the same document. And using EEG supports the creation of an after-action report. It also provides a consistent process for assessing preparedness throughout the exercise. And it helps organizations map exercise results, for how well they did our objectives, what core capabilities we were testing, those capability targets, critical tasks, to further analyze and assess how well we did during the exercise. So improvement planning. This is kind of what we want to achieve after we've gotten through our exercise. So we've been through everything. We know how well we did. We've gathered our data. We know that there are some things that we can do better on. So we do improvement planning. The process of identifying those areas to improve upon, turning into concrete, measurable corrective actions. So if maybe during a hazmat incident, my team is struggling to put on their PPE, I know that this is an area that we need to improve, and I can start to develop a plan in order to increase that skill level. So whether I'm going to plan additional training for my team to undergo, or maybe we're going to try to do another drill where they run through putting on their PPE specifically. There are different things that we can do in order to create improvement and increase skill level. And that's the whole purpose of an improvement plan. We want to continue to shape a jurisdiction's preparedness priorities and support continued improvements. And one of the ways we can use improvement planning is in that after action report. So this is a document designed to identify those corrective actions and increase preparedness in specific areas that need improvement. These can be discussed via meetings, whether it's here like Zoom or in person. You can also actually write a report. FEMA writes a report for every hurricane season and an after action report. So it's not just for exercises, simulations, or drills. After action reports are actually a very useful tool to measure your success against an actual response. So the question y'all are probably now asking yourselves is, we're healthcare simulators. How can we use a FEMA program? Well, simulation is an important part of teaching and practicing healthcare. I have lots of nurses and doctor friends, and at some point in their education and their careers, they've undergone some sort of simulation. The simulation provides an area to practice skills, build confidence, and prepare for real world situations. Well, exercises are doing the exact same thing. We are wanting to build skills, build confidence in our personnel so that when they respond to real world situations, they can respond to them with success. HSEEP just provides sorry, the lights in my office went out. Oh, hey Dahlia, can you help with the lights? Thank you. Sorry about that. It's after 5 o'clock and everybody's left now. Thank you, Dahlia. But as I was saying, HSEEP isn't necessarily trying to change anything that you do as a simulator or make you practice exercises, because I believe simulation is a type of exercise. But HSEEP is going to help you more effectively design your simulations by giving you tools and being capability and objective driven, by giving you guys tools to plan and organize different sorts of educational exercises and drills, and continue to improve the capabilities of who we are as simulators, designers, and planners. So my favorite part is looking at where HSEEP has actually been used in real life. And as an emergency manager, I've used HSEEP a lot. We used it on November 29th here in the city of Tampa to create a special events mass casualty exercise. I've kind of dribbled the pictures throughout the presentation, but at the bottom you can kind of see there's a picture. I'm really proud of the exercise. It was my first baby. From our actors from that mass casualty exercise. This was a full-scale exercise. We worked with 27 different agencies across the Tampa Bay region to put this exercise on, including hospital partners as we were testing medical search capabilities. Florida's Department of Emergency Management does an exercise every year. They host an annual tabletop exercise, so that discussion-based exercise. I got to attend one this year. We did it on terrorism and the impacts of a drone attack on our water and chemical systems. All national airports are required to do a triannual exercise. So if there was ever a large plane crash at an airport, they have to be prepared to do that. So that's that top picture up here is the triannual exercise, I think from 6 years ago at Tampa International Airport. So there was a mass casualty incident and different firefighters and hospitals and EMS personnel got together to respond to that incident. I think it was 2 years ago now, they hosted their last one. They called it Operation Pelican Down, which I think is the best part of exercises, is giving them really cool names. And then medically, HCA and Tampa General Hospital, they do exercises using HSEEP every year. They use students from the University of South Florida to come in and evaluate how they respond to different sort of medical search incidents. So they always use a different sort of scenario, but they always want to test how well their emergency rooms respond when they're overflooded with patients. It's a really great exercise. They do it every year. You always get a lot of cool pictures from students. And then Advent Health, in the last couple of years, they do different types of decontamination exercises. So they had our students at USF in our short program come through and volunteer as actors for their decontamination processes. And as students, we actually got to be hosed down and stripped down, and it was a really fun experience. We were slathered in ketchup to be like different sort of blood and contaminants. But HSEEP is used not just in emergency management, but in healthcare as well. So I kind of want to turn it over to you guys. You guys are simulators. You've been in the healthcare field from a very long time and have so many different experiences, come from so many different organizations. I wanted to walk through a scenario with you guys. You see, you're going to need another sip of water. So I'm going to turn it over to you. So if you guys feel comfortable, please go ahead and turn off your mics and shout out some ideas that we can use to create our own exercise. So first up,
I want to say that I was part of the MCI, the mass casualty. It was a lot of fun.
Yes. Like when you're participating in an exercise and you're not necessarily planning it, you get to have a lot of fun with the acting and the makeup.
Definitely.
I always have fun when I get to act. But continuing on, I want you guys to help me build an exercise. So we're going to kind of walk through the design and development of it. So what's maybe a capability that is something that you would address within your own organizations? Does anybody kind of have anything that they specifically want to try to improve in their healthcare organizations? Like maybe fire safety, decontamination procedures? If not, I'll just walk through it ourselves. Okay, so let's say we want to address our, fire suppression skills. So what does that kind of capability, does that fall under? Fire suppression, that's the response capability. So I'm looking, that is my mission area as response. So I'm going to pick core capabilities such as interoperational communication as a response capability that I want to try to do. What are going to be my priorities? What do I want to accomplish? Well, I'm testing fire suppression because that's a skill that maybe I need to build in my organization. So I want to make sure that my people know how to use a fire extinguisher. So we're going to be able to give them, real fire extinguishers. We also want to make sure that they have a knowledge of fire. So when do you approach a fire? And maybe when do you stop and let professionals take over, the professional firefighters? So now that we kind of know what we want to do with our exercise, who's going to be in our exercise, right? So we know that, say, maybe I'm trying to teach a group of nurses fire suppression skills. So if there's ever a small fire on my floor, they know how to put it out quickly and effectively. So they are going to be my players. As a planner, I'm going to be part of the exercise design staff. And then maybe we have really great relationships with the local fire department. So I'm going to ask them to come in and evaluate my exercise as a community partner and their stakeholders. So they're going to want to know what we're doing with our exercise. Now, we've conducted our exercise. Everybody played their part. We put out our fires. We did a great job. Now we need to evaluate. So what task needed to be completed to reach our exercise objectives? So did they grab the right fire extinguisher? Did they use the proper pass method when they were putting out, the trash can fire that we simulated? Did they show mastery of those skills? And how am I going to document that evaluation, that observation that we made during those evaluations? Are we even going to use EEGs because they exist, but we don't have to use them? Are we just going to be using participant feedback forms because this was a small in-house exercise? So we just need to communicate with our nurses, have them get back to us on some of the things that they thought they did well and some of the things that they want to do better. Or will we actually have our evaluators completing those EEGs? Those are kind of some things to think about with evaluation. Now it's time to, do improvement. So we did great with using the pass method, but maybe we struggled a little bit with getting over eager and trying to tackle a fire that got too big for our britches. So in fire rescue, we say anything bigger than the size of a trash can, that's a no-go. Like not like the big trash cans, but like the little office waste bin. If it's any bigger than that, then we can't approach it. So maybe we know that if our nurses are trying to approach anything bigger than that little cylindrical waste bin, maybe one of the things that we want to improve on is our knowledge of fire safety. So how do we, do that? We maybe host a seminar on fire safety and fire skills so that we know when a fire is safe to approach and when it's not. How do we maintain our skills? Well, they did great with their pass, with putting out the fire and using their extinguishers. How do we maintain that? We're going to exercise it again next year. And those are kind of some things that we can do in order to keep those skills polished. But now that is all that I have lecture-wise for you all. Do anybody have any questions? Is there any questions for me in the chat?
Yeah, thank you, Madelyn.
Yeah.
We do have a question in the chat from Carrie Blake. She's asking, I'm curious how healthcare simulation standard or best practice inform the programs, especially in operation area. Not sure I quite understand the question. If
Yeah,
Carrie...
I can't say I understand it either. Carrie, could you elaborate for us just a little bit?
Sure. So the healthcare simulation standards of best practice inform the way that simulation is done in all types of healthcare setting, including emergency management or EMS. So I'm curious how those best practices spoke into your program development or the program development of the HSEE, whatever this acronym was that you were sharing about.
HSEEP. Carrie, I wish I had an answer for you. HSEEP is as old as I am. So it's been around as long as I have studied. And anytime I tried to look specifically at HSEEP and simulation standards, it was very, very blurry. I do have a document that you might find useful. The WHO has a simulation development guide that uses HSEEP principles. But HSEEP was specifically designed in mind for FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security in creating and designing these sorts of real world scenarios that we use to practice our skills. I can't say I have a great answer for you, but I can point you towards some resources that I know exist on the emergency management side of simulation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Angel, you had your hand up?
I'm going to put your email in the chat, okay?
Yes, you can feel free to email me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I was going to say that I've used this actually in a college setting where we wanted to conduct a interprofessional simulation with various departments in our school. And so we use this as a planning process for the exercise. And so we included EMS, fire, criminal justice, nursing, respiratory, pharmacy, and digital media. So they actually recorded the entire event. And so we brought in stakeholders. We brought in our local emergency management for also for guidance. And then prior to the actual exercise, we conducted a tabletop to identify any potential issues we hadn't thought through during the planning process. And then we scheduled the event, and it was very successful.
Good.
The whole idea was to get people out of their silos, because a lot of times we tend to train our students in silos, but they don't get to really interact with other professions. And so this forced everybody to have to work together while they're still students, but also giving them more realistic feeling for what it's like in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I love HSEEP. I got to use it as a student too and participate in different exercises. And it's good to get out of your silos young, at least you even know what silos are. And HSEEP really, really forces you to, break out, because one of the biggest things that they want to accomplish is interdisciplinary work, working with different partners. Anybody who has a stake in anything, especially when you're designing your exercises, they should be involved, because at the end of the day, we all kind of have a say in what happens to us in our world. And as we're all working together, we want to be able to communicate and practice together. So thank you, Angel, for sharing that. That was a really, really awesome story to share. I don't know if this was recording, but yes, I will share the slides. I think I should be able to share the slides with you, everybody in the chat. I'll add a link, or I can send it to Mariano, and Mariano can share it with you all who is in attendance. I don't know which one will work easier. Mariano,
I do. Actually, this is actually going to be posted on YouTube, so you can watch it there afterwards, and I will try to add a link with the slides once you format those.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions? I do have just 2 more slides to get through, and then I will set you all free. No more questions? Okie dokie. So I did want to provide y'all with some additional resources. HSEEP, it's a lot to swallow, and in my personal opinion, I only covered just the very tip of the iceberg. So as we were going through today's presentation, if you found yourself interested in HSEEP, I would highly suggest that you use some of these additional resources. FEMA has a preparedness toolkit, which kind of really dives into all those different sorts of documents and planning tools that HSEEP provides. WHO or WHO has a simulation specific development guide that uses HSEEP principles, which I think, Carrie, you might find that really fascinating. And then there's the actual HSEEP doctrine on the FEMA website. That is a 76-page document that discusses all these different topics that we talked about today, diving even deeper into some of them in a written form for people who might be more of a visual learner and less of an audio learners. And then if you guys really, really like this program and want to bring it back to your own organizations, there are HSEEP trainings. So you can get trained on this and how to use this. You can find, as you live in Florida or work in Florida, you can find them on CertTrack, which is a website developed by the Florida Department of Emergency Management to post all sorts of different sorts of emergency trainings. It's going to be known as EK or L 149, or excuse me, 146 is the training code. The next training is going to be in Clay County and will be held from June 25th to June 26th. Again, if those are some things that you guys are interested in, I highly suggest you kind of dig deeper into it or even get trained on it. But that is all I have for you guys. I really appreciate you guys giving me your time tonight. And I hope you took something away from this. I know I had a lot of fun preparing this and sharing some information with you guys today. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Madelyn. This was very insightful. If anybody else has any questions, just a reminder, this webinar is going to be posted. It actually was posted in live in Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to go back and review this or watch it again, you can always do that in those 2 platforms. Once again, Madelyn, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. Mariano, I will send you those slides when we get off.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. You all have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.